Yet another sad chapter in the sad tale that has been the Hellboy movie that came out a little while ago. A Hellboy movie that I'm going to tell you I had a lot of optimism for, and I was really excited about. I mean, you had the comic book creator behind it. You had a really good director attached, getting David Harbour, who a lot of us are starting to like a lot, as the lead. And, you know, the first trailer put a lot of people off, but then subsequent trailers started to look a lot better. I was excited for it. I ended up being, like many of you guys, I was very disappointed in the movie. And I think a lot of you guys were. David Harbour has not exactly handled the situation well. You know, everything from, remember a while ago, we talked about a story where he basically was doing an interview and threw everybody else under the bus, said, I did my job. I did a good job, but everybody else sucked making this movie. It's like, come on, David, why are you saying stuff like that? Well, apparently David Harbour now, he is now putting the blame elsewhere for the failure of Hellboy, and he is actually directly blaming the fans. To be specific, the more hardcore Hellboy fans is who he is blaming on this right now. If we go over, this is coming to us from our friends over at Joe Blow, whose headline is Hellboy failed because of Hellboy fans, according to David Harbour. This is the exact comment that he wrote. Okay, I've got it here. This is David Harbour talking. I think it failed before we began shooting because I think that people didn't want us to make this movie, Harbour then added. Guillermo del Toro and Ron Perlman created this iconic thing that we thought could be reinvented, and then fans, certainly the loudness of the internet was like, we do not want you to touch this. And then we made a movie that I think is fun, and I think had its problems, but was a fun movie, and then people were just very, very against it. That's people's rights, but I learned my lesson a lot of different ways. So that's kind of Harbour's assessment of the situation. And that's fine, and I accept that. Here's the problem. Rob, while I think he is correct in saying that there were a lot of people who came out and said, we don't want you to make this movie, he's not wrong. I mean, there were a vocal segment of people saying, if it's not Ron Perlman, we don't want you to make this movie. That wasn't the majority of the movie-going audience, but there was certainly an element of fandom who was saying that. So he's right about that. He's also probably not wrong if he thinks there was probably an element of fandom that were hoping it would fail and weren't going to like it no matter what. He's probably not wrong about that either. That is probably true. However, what I would say to David Harbour is this. Heath Ledger's casting as Joker would like to speak to you. You think fans wanted that when they announced it? With all the Brokeback Mountain boy? They didn't want that either. And they were against it, and they were... As a matter of fact, let's go more recent. Venom would like to have a word with you. You want to talk about movies where everybody's, you can't make that movie. Venom without Spider-Man, that can't be done. You think that movie didn't have that? But guess what? Not everybody, but a lot of fans are willing to take their pre-existing biases, pre-existing expectations, and put them at the door. And listen, a lot of movie fans love the experience of coming out of a movie theater and going, you know what, I thought that was going to suck and I liked it. We love that as movie fans. There's very few as satisfying experiences to me as a movie fan than going into a movie that I think is going to be rock bottom garbage and coming out going, you know what? That was all right. You know, we as film fans love that sort of thing. And I think Venom proved that if you had delivered an entertaining and engaging and decent movie, film fans, for the most part, would have been willing to come out and going, hey, I thought this looked like it was going to suck, but it was all right. The problem was that the movie didn't deliver that. Now, that's a subjective opinion, of course, but a lot of us film fans just felt like the movie didn't work. So while I think, Rob, that Harbour is right in saying, you know, a lot of the fans didn't want this to work in the first place, no, he's not wrong about that. But there are a lot of other examples of movies that face the same stuff and were able to make it work. So I just felt like this was a little bit of a tone-deaf comment to make. And at this point, he should probably just move on from it. I don't know, Rob. You heard what he had to say. Does it ring true for you? Does it not? What do you assess here?
Well, you know, as was reported, the director, Neil Marshall, who I really, really like, I know him a little bit, and the producer were at odds on this film. There was a lot, it was reported in the trades, there was a lot of acrimony on the set of this movie between the producer and the director, and I don't think. I think that has a lot to do with what went wrong. Different visions, competing visions. I don't think Neil Marshall was allowed to do what he wanted to do with this film. And, you know, when you start blaming fans, the one thing about fans is they might be vocal before a movie comes out. But when a movie's on its way out, there's nobody who's more loyal. All fans turn out. You might have been bitching, but if you're a Hellboy fan, you're going to go see this movie. And I think ultimately the problem with this film is it ultimately was a disappointment from every standpoint. And I think it really stemmed from the acrimony between the producer and the director. The director, he was undermined. And Neil Marshall, who is actually, I think, if you've seen Dog Soldiers or, you know, you've seen any of his movies, he's a perfect director for, I mean, The Descent is one of the greatest horror movies of the last 20 years.
It is my second favorite horror film of all time.
I mean, Neil Marshall, terrific director. You don't undercut a creative like Neil Marshall. You let him do what you hired him to do. And I think that was where the film sort of fell down, is it wasn't allowed to be a fully realized vision because of the acrimony between the producer and the director. And everybody wants to blame the fans. And what people don't realize is they'll bitch and moan and complain all the time. But when they see something, they're the first line of cheerleaders for these movies. And they won't bitch and moan and complain unless the movie lets them down. If it doesn't let them down, you're going to have an army of people out there singing the film's praises to high heaven. So to blame the fans after the fact, I think it's never a good thing.
I mean, because here's essentially what it's saying, Rob. You complain about the movie before we went to go see it. This is hypothetical, by the way. So you complain about the movie before we go see it. You're one of these people like, oh, man, listen, there's no point making this movie. If it's not Ron Perlman, I don't even want to go see it. And I hear you say, all right. Do you think I'm going to come out of the movie and go, wow, I didn't like that movie because Rob complained before I saw the movie about something? No, I'm going to go in and I'm going to come out either going to like the movie or I don't. People aren't coming out of theaters going, well, I didn't like that because somebody on the internet said they didn't like it. That's not the way it works. A lot of people like to pretend that's the way it works. But anyway, guys, question here is, what do you think about that whole situation with that? Do you think, look, I think there are some true things in what David Harbour is saying. I agree, but I just don't agree with his conclusions. But maybe you guys are thinking of some things that I'm not taking into consideration here. What do you guys think about it? Jump down to the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. All right.